Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the first part thereof for the 20th of July 2025. Sorry that I did very little content yesterday. I was watching the British and Irish Lions face off against Australia in rugby, and when you're drinking Guinness at 10:30 in the morning, the day's not going to go well. And when I came back here, I just passed out essentially. And that was the end of my content for the day, so sorry about that. Okay, let's go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. Did I mention that that the Lions won? 1,040 personnel lost. That's a bit lower than we have seen in the last few days, but around the range that we have been expecting, given what's been going on the last few weeks. 3 tanks, 9 troop-carrying AFVs, both of those figures below the daily average. 52 artillery systems, again, over double the daily average. Really significant number there again. And that shows you, I think, what the objectives are for the Ukrainians. Drone operators, crews, and launch sites. Artillery. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 121 vehicles and fuel tanks. I think you're seeing more vehicles being used. I mean, motorbikes particularly. Andrew Perpetua's talking about that. I've seen another couple of videos this morning on motorcycle attacks, one in the Liman direction, where it's clear that that's a preferred vehicle to attack the Ukrainian positions. Whether through necessity and then finding out that it conveys an advantage, or through whatever reason, it is what they are now using more predominantly. Worth having a little look at this in terms of losses and wounded. Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, in Ukraine, some people with tourniquets can't escape because drones are waiting to kill them. So if you need a tourniquet quite often if you've got heavy blood loss, tourniquet needs to be put on super quick and it will save your life. But you don't want a tourniquet on for a particularly long time, otherwise it causes problems. You need a tourniquet on, get yourself to a staging point, get yourself to a medical centre of one sort or another, and get your injury looked at properly. If you keep a tourniquet on for too long, you are going to need to amputate that limb. So, quote, there are so many people in Ukraine now with tourniquet syndrome because the tourniquets were on for more than 6 hours. They're all getting very high arm amputations, leg amputations. And that's coming from a war zone surgeon, David Knott. Life is all about taking calculated risks. I mean, I suppose you would rather have an amputation than death, though. And that's that's the situation. But this goes to show that getting injured on the contact line is obviously it's a horrible thing to happen, right? No one likes getting injured, but on a contact line particularly, you are surrounded by drones. The drones are flying left, right and center, and getting out of that dugout or that trench line or that tree line to somewhere where you can be medically attended is going to be exceptionally dangerous and very, very difficult. And that is leading to tourniquets being applied and left on for too long. Okay, Tim White says, I also said last night how occupied areas of Ukraine were under attack. Now Ukraine intelligence releases a video showing numerous hits on Russian air defense systems in Donetsk. He says 6 radar stations and 2 launchers were hit, though it's not possible to say exactly when the strikes occurred. So that's important. Like, we can do geolocations fairly easily. Chronological locations are much more difficult. Grayskull says a video of the GUR dismantling air defense in Donetsk overall. So he's saying Donetsk, and I don't know if this is the same video, but he's saying 3 radar stations of the Bottle 48Y6K1, 2 Nebo, I think that is also SV radar stations, and 2 starting installations of the S300V complex. So he's talking about video with similar numbers of kit being taken out, but talking about Donetsk here. Tim White says Crimea. I don't know if it's the same video. That's 2 videos showing destruction of that high value equipment. Then that's really good news for Ukraine. So let's have a look at this. So, yeah, we have these large radar systems getting shellacked, and that's good news. There's your K1. There's your S300V, some system of that. That looks like a Niobe, a Nebo. Yeah, K1. There you go. Again, these are that's your launcher, S300 launcher by the looks of it. These are really high value bits of kit, and that's going to be very good for the Ukrainians. Thank you very much. Hopefully that's two different instances, but it's probably the same video, just a bit of confusion as to where it happened. Good news there. Excellent news, really. I want to show you this video because, and I've talked about this previously a number of times, the quality of these pilots. I mean, they are operating in very difficult war zones, under difficult conditions, and they are doing some amazing things in terms of, you know, their flight skills. Dimko's Luktenko says, this takes a lot of skill to destroy invaders like that. I suggest more armies around the world start learning those dead cheap, extremely precise striking tools, learning how to use them. You can learn a lot from Ukrainians. Indeed, the Americans seem to be onto that. Their mega deal that they're going to do with equipment going to Ukraine from the US might involve equipment going from the Ukrainians to the US. And yeah, that I would assume the Ukrainians, after this war ends, whenever that may be, will be training the heck out of allied nations in how to do drone warfare. Jiggersport here says, shows this video of some pretty good flying from a Ukrainian here, 9-second, very quick video, going down into underneath some netting here, under there, through, under some more netting, through, and then taking out someone in a trench line. Just, you know, that's the sort of thing that's pretty standard fare now for the Ukrainians. Right, the Legion of Freedom, interesting that this is out because people have been asking me recently what's happened to the Free Legion or Legion Freedom of Russia. What's happened to the Russia Volunteer Corps? Here, the Legion Freedom of Russia penetrated 30 kilometers deep into occupied Zaporizhzhia region. So they were up on the northern border. Predominantly, that's where we've seen them previously. But we haven't heard much from these guys for a long time. Now, at least one of the units is operating in the Zaporizhzhia direction. As a result of a pinpoint explosion of a service car, 3 Akhmat militants were destroyed. Intelligence was also collected regarding logistics, equipment, and command posts of the enemy, so that you can see a little video of them doing some what almost looks like sabotage, behind the lines activity. Now, I keep talking about how unmanned ground drones are being used. UGVs are being used more and more frequently for a wide variety of tasks. Here, a Ukrainian UGV has stolen a PKM machine gun from the Russians in a pretty decent little move here, driving into Russian area, picking up a machine gun, PKM machine gun, and then coming back to the Ukrainian trenches with that machine gun, negotiating some terrain, and then the Ukrainians get to use a nice kind of heavy machine gun. Yeah, check me out, says the controller. And then, yeah, they seem pretty happy with that. There's a machine gun afterwards. Yay. So anyway, they're getting used more and more. Russians have been accused of murdering 11 civilians in the Central African Republic. So this is aligned to what Philip Abaji Jr. was telling me in the live chat I had with him. Go and check that out. It is really interesting. He's a Nigerian journalist that talks about Russian influence in the Sahel region of Africa. The Associated Press is reporting that the Wagner Group, now directly controlled by the Kremlin, since they murdered Prigozhin, actually called the Africa Corps now, shot dead the locals at the gold mine they control in Ndasima in the Central African Republic. So shooting at the Central African Republic gold mine run by Russia's Wagner leaves 11 dead. Worth also noting that Ukrinform is reporting that Russian Wagner mercenary Igor Nestorov former trainer of boxer Alexander Povetkin, was shot dead in Mali, according to the GUR. So I don't know whether they're announcing that because they were involved in his killing. I don't know. Now, I talked yesterday about how the Russians are targeting Ukrainian railway logistics. Here is a video of the Ukrainian railway system being targeted. It's a destroyed electric locomotive. Replacing locomotives is difficult, as almost all countries except ex-Soviet have a different gauge. It is critical for Ukraine to cripple the Russian electric rail system first. This is true. Like, you have to change trains at the Polish border into Ukraine because they operate on a different gauge in Ukraine. They operate on the old Soviet gauge. So if you want to get these locomotives to replace the ones you've lost, you're going to have to go to ex-Soviet nations who might still operate on that gauge. It's an issue. They are, I think, spending some money now on a European gauge railway going to Lviv, so you don't have to change at the border. You can go all the way to Lviv. And that's going to cost, I think, is it something like 75 million they're going to spend on that? Europeans possibly helping there. I think that's really important. Okay, that is something to watch out for, though. The Russians are definitely targeting more Ukrainian railway logistics. Ukrainian air defense has eliminated last night 25 out of 57, so the interception rate is pretty poor. It depends where the Russians send those drones. If they send them closer to the front lines, Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, that kind of area, then you are not going to shoot them down. They're too close to the front line for air defense to be particularly decent. You're not going to have your best air defense systems there, and you don't have long enough time to acquire the target. It pops up, gets sent from relatively close to where you are, and then you can only shoot it down over kind of a 10 kilometer, 20 kilometer area before it hits the target. Whereas if they are going for Lviv, Kyiv, you've got many hours to shoot them down, and so the interception rates are better. So it could be that that's the case, but certainly, yeah, the ratio is not that good. 25 out of 57. Luckily, not so many drones. So that's one thing, I guess. 18 was shot down, 7 taken out by electronic warfare. There is, as you can see there, evidence of the Russians doing some damage to Ukrainians. Russian terror campaign against Ukrainian civilians continues, says the Euromaidan press. On the night of the 20th of July, Russian drones killed a 78-year-old woman and ignited 3 homes in northeastern Sumy village near the front line. So a lot of activity around Sumy still. We hear from Freuding, Christian Freuding, the German Bundeswehr Major General, that Russia is planning to launch 2,000 kamikaze drones simultaneously against Ukraine. The general emphasised the need to introduce, quote, small means of defence, noting that using expensive missiles such as those in the Patriot system is inefficient against relatively cheap Shahed drones, which cost around 30 to 50,000 euros a pop. 2,000 in a single night would be insane and very difficult for the Ukrainians. They need to take out the Russian manufacturing facilities of these drones. Now, the Ukrainians have been somewhat active with drones recently, overnight, over the last few nights. But unfortunately, there's just not a lot of evidence of them hitting anything half decent. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not hitting stuff. Remember, absence of evidence doesn't always mean an evidence of absence. So, yes. So it doesn't mean it just because you don't have evidence of Ukraine hitting high-value targets doesn't mean that they didn't hit high-value targets. However, you're not really justified in thinking that they did either, right? So you can't just make stuff up and say, oh, yeah, they definitely hit loads of really high-value stuff, because you're not justified in believing that. So rather, you're justified in just saying, I don't really know. See, but I would add on to that actually we are justified in thinking it's plausible that the Ukrainians aren't hitting much stuff at the moment, just because we were previously seeing evidence of that. So where we would expect evidence and there is no evidence, I find that disconfirmatory evidence, right? So it's not proof, but I think it's plausible to think that the Ukrainians are struggling with their drones to hit high-value Russian targets. But there might be another explanation. There could be, and it could be OPSEC and whatever. But I'm just slightly worried at the moment that the Russians are doing a better job of shooting down Ukrainian drones. So last night, Moscow faced one of the heaviest drone attacks since May. And that's Moscow. It's a massive city. You expect loads of evidence if there was success happening around there. But Russia claims that 98 drones were intercepted. So that's a lot of Ukrainian drones sent in. 19 were shot down over Moscow Oblast. And we do have quite a lot of video evidence of drones getting shot down in midair, right? So we are definitely seeing the Russians hitting drones. So you got some drones hitting some residential buildings. That's going to be as a result of electronic warfare. Debris from intercepted drones is evident in a number of places on roads. So we do have evidence that the Russians are shooting down drones, and we are lacking evidence that the Ukrainians are hitting high-value targets. What else do we have? 134 commercial flights were diverted to alternative airfields due to safety measures. So these the carpet plan. It's a carpet plan where they shut down incoming and outgoing air activity, and that has a big effect on the aviation industry and people's business and holiday trips. Now here we've got drones falling on the road, it looks like here. There's other video evidence of drones getting shot down. I don't know if I've got it, but yeah, being shot down in midair. Drones attacked the Moscow region at night. In Zelenograd, a residential building was damaged as a result of the work of Russian air defense. Explosions were also heard in Tula. The carpet plan was implemented at all Moscow airports. What we do have evidence of is, here's a video of coming from Rostov, that it includes damage to the control building at the Likaya station, railway station. Now, I said to you yesterday there was a bit of a nightmare with the railways in Rostov. It actually caused 100 trains to be brought to a standstill in Russia. Apparently 40-degree temperatures. It was all a bit of a nightmare. So there is a bit of success for the Ukrainian activity. But again, that's because we have evidence of that. So it doesn't seem that OPSEC is completely widespread. So if you're saying, well, we're not seeing Ukrainian successes because of OPSEC, but we are seeing some successes. And so, you are maybe cherry picking a little bit there if that's the case. Now, I don't want to be too much of a doomer, but I also want to be reporting what I think and what I believe to be accurate. Another collapse at the Russian airports. So over the past 2 days, 134 planes have been diverted. 78 were supposed to land at Sheremetyevo, 45 at Nikovo, 8 at Domodedovo, and 3 at Zhukovsky. So, yeah, bit of a nightmare for the aviation in Russia. Now, the Ukrainians here, I should have had this earlier. Ukrainians taking out a Gran 2 drone right next to a Yak 52 aircraft that was acting as an interceptor, shooting them down. So these are two-seater planes. One person might have a shotgun or similar, taking pot shots at drones. But of course, you've got to get fairly close. I'm fairly sure I saw a kind of obituary statement of a 63-year-old pilot from Odessa. These get flown around from Odessa, these Yak 52s, or this Yak 50. I don't know if they've got more than one. And I heard that there's an experienced, 63-year-old pilot that's died, and I can't think he'd be flying MiGs or F-16s. So it's likely a Yak. I wonder whether a Yak has come into a bit of a problem shooting at a drone that's very close to it. Anyway, right. Let's now go on to other bits and pieces. So a couple of days ago, Tim White reported on Russia announcing it released 11 stolen children. Today, Ukraine confirmed that they've arrived home and showing a video of the happy youngsters arriving back at Maidan in Kyiv. So there are children who have been filtered through Russia and have essentially been stolen. There are many, many thousands, maybe tens of thousands of children that have been stolen, kidnapped from Ukraine by the Russians. And this is why Putin and 2 others have international arrest warrants on their head from the International Criminal Court, precisely because of this. Right, so this is a war crime. At least 11 of them have been reconciled there. Good news. Now, Tatarigami has something to say on some military matters, Sumy region. Lately, Russia's slow progress in the Sumy region is being explained away by some as a diversion, an attempt to pull Ukrainian forces from the Donbass region with no serious objectives in Sumy itself. The idea Might be reasonable for some until you look a little bit closer. So since the start of the full-scale war, Russia has usually concentrated what it sees as elite assault units in directions it considers valuable, strategic, or otherwise important. The current makeup of Russian forces in the Sumy direction speaks volumes. So up there, you've got the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. They've had a tonking. Remember, they've lost almost their entire upper echelons of command in that strike on Koronovo. You've got now one of Putin's favourite assault units, the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade, units from the 76th and 106th Air Assault Division. So you've got the Naval Infantry, the Marines, and the paratroopers, the VDV. These are your crack troops, supposedly. They're up in Sumy. The 83rd and 11th Separate Air Assault Brigades and the 177th Naval Infantry Regiment. I also think the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade is up there too. These are the units Moscow tends to deploy mostly where it expects real gains. These units are usually more combat ready and better suited to offensive operations than regular motor rifle troops. In Russian military thinking, these are the formations that matter. There's another theory making the rounds. Russia is trying to stretch the front, forcing Ukraine to thin out, but using elite units for that purpose doesn't really add up. And let's not forget it was Ukraine that expanded the front in August 2024 with the Kursk incursion. Right now, Ukraine is holding its ground in Sumy, largely thanks to resources allocated to this area. That probably comes, and this is the important part, that probably comes as the expense of other areas, most notably Pokrovsk. So Pokrovsk is in all sorts of trouble at the moment, where the situation is steadily worsening. Still, I'd argue this trade-off is the right call. So, do you get Sumy back or lose a bit of Pokrovsk? Certainly stop the Russians from getting closer to Sumy. I think that is probably, I'm in agreement with what Tatarigami says here. So I think, you give up Pokrovsk, or, you obviously try your hardest to protect it with what you've got, but you concentrate on Sumy if you're going to concentrate anywhere. That's where the best Russian forces are. And you're actually doing a good job of retaking. In fact, Kindrativka has definitely been retaken now. There were Russians, I think, that were surrounded there, cut off up in Sumy. So I think the Ukrainians are doing a good job, particularly on the western flank there. If Sumy the Sumy area were to fall, or if Russian forces push deep enough, it could open the way for an advance into Chernihiv Oblast, and that would put Kiev under direct threat and force Ukraine to redeploy troops north, weakening other parts of the front. In agreement as well. You don't want Sumy. Sumy is a major city. If you start allowing the Russians to get within artillery range of Sumy, you're in trouble. And at that point, the conversation with both political and military would shift. Instead of we can't let Russia take Donbass, it would become, once again, we can't let them take Kiev. Just like it did in February and March of 2022, this would be disastrous for Ukraine. And while this might sound optimistic, there are still countless ways the situation could deteriorate, especially if North Korea were to cross the line and directly invade Ukraine. To prevent such a scenario, strong consequences must be outlined for North Koreans. Fully agree with that. I've been telling you for a long time that you should not dismiss the North Koreans. They are a massive problem for Ukraine and have been. Right, at a leading international Landuro conference on European land forces held in Wiesbaden, Germany, Robert Magyarbrovdi, so the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, has said, I lead 12 units of drone pilots. 95% of them were civilians before the war began. They were businessmen, athletes, lawyers, singers, anyone you can imagine, but not military. Altogether, we make up 2% of the Ukraine's entire army. Yet, we destroy 1 in every 3 enemy personnel and 1 in every 3 enemy targets. Putin, who promised to take us in 3 days, has, in 3.5 years, only taught us how to defend our homeland, our children, and our land. You think the Russian people would have enough? I don't get their fear of Putin after what Ukraine has proven. Russia buys soldiers from Asia now since Russian dons are gone. May victory come soon for Ukraine, and may Russia have no dictator day soon. Really interesting words there from Brovdi. Fascinating that his units are responsible for 1 in 3 personnel and equipment losses. Just incredible. Now, I reported on this yesterday about hackers hitting Gasprom. Just a bit more meat on the bones to what was said yesterday. Hackers erased Gazprom's digital brain in a catastrophic cyber attack, according to the HUR, the GUR. Ukrainian operatives reportedly wiped servers, clouds, and backups, crippling the control systems of Russia's gas empire. I mean, that really could be massive. Imagine you are some, I don't know, AT&T in the US, or Verizon, or, you know, or an energy company, I don't know, British Gas in the UK, and your entire systems were just completely knackered. The Russians, was it the Russians who, so we had cyber attacks in the UK recently on Co-op and M&S, two of our retailers. Co-op was screwed for like 6 weeks. It cost just millions and millions, and it was an absolute nightmare. My local Co-op had empty shelves for some time. Literally, they couldn't, because their computer systems were taken out by hackers, they couldn't order food in. They couldn't get, you know, they've lost the ability to be able to like make orders without computer systems. Just absolutely incredible. Russia has moved to restrict foreign messaging apps on Putin's order. So this includes, as we'll see, WhatsApp and Telegram. Russian President Putin has instructed his government to develop new restrictions targeting foreign messaging apps and software from so-called unfriendly countries, according to the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service. Now, they're preparing to restrict foreign apps and messaging services, including WhatsApp, possibly Telegram. The Foreign Intelligence Service reports a new state-linked app called Max, made by VK, which is kind of their equivalent of Facebook, is being imposed on officials with full access to device data. So in other words, you're getting back to Stasi, KGB style, complete control of data, of listening to people. Like, this is going old school dictatorship, old school kind of authoritarian communism of the 60s and 70s and 80s. We have just a random analysis here to a degree from The Analyst on why China is in no place to help Russia. China have their fourth plenum coming up, where they get together and talk about, you know, next 5-year plan. Some people saying that's going to be very, very interesting, that there could be power shifts going on vis-a-vis Xi Jinping. Gargantuan floods in the past week. That's in China. Beijing is seeing the worst in its history. Some 30 minor dams have collapsed under the pressure of water, and towns upstream have been inundated on a scale unprecedented. Some of the video is truly shocking. The scale of it is quite staggering. Bridges washed away, buildings up to their second floor in water, tens of thousands of cars destroyed. These were not gentle floods in any way. The speed and torrential nature of the inundations over a huge area are beyond unprecedented, yet barely a mention of it anywhere in Western media. And of course, Texas floods were huge, and, you know, people in the West now no longer feel comfortable talking about climate change, because the US has wiped out the ability for their own country to compile and analyze data, and it's somehow woke that, you know, climate science is woke. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And yet floods are just hitting so many places in an unprecedented manner. There's plenty of videos, said to The Analyst, if you choose to look for it. So when anybody says China is in a fit state to do anything for Russia, the reality is it's almost unable to do anything for itself right now. 3 years from south to central and now northern China, there have been floods on a level we can barely imagine in Europe or North America. The economy has been severely damaged by them. Each set has caused mayhem over tens of thousands of square kilometres, all the way to the sea. Over-engineered infrastructure and control over the water supply to rivers has been incapable of dealing with such massive water flows, leading to catastrophic failures and damage. China puts on a face, but it's actually being torn apart by catastrophic climate change events, doing billions in damage. It has little or nothing, and certainly not the bandwidth, to be nailing out Russia from its self-imposed stupidity. Russia will sink all by itself as China looks on. So that's one view. I don't know how accurate that is, but China essentially does have some of its own problems. Now, I talked about the 18th package of sanctions that the EU is looking to impose. That got through the ambassadorial stage. I don't know if they're fully in place yet, but I said that it's going to be up to G7 nations and allies that aren't within the EU to follow suit. And I mentioned Canada, Japan, obviously the US, UK as well. Well, the UK has tightened its oil price caps in a blow to Putin's war machine, says the UK government. Price cap on crude oil will be cut from $60 to $47.6 a barrel, a significant hit to Russia's revenues, which have already fallen 35% year on year. Says by May 2025. The UK is taking decisive action to cut off supplies of Russian oil, imposing sanctions on more than 250 ships transporting Russian energy resources. The UK has pledged to provide Ukraine with $3 billion pounds. Goodness me, I got there in the end, third time lucky, in annual military aid for as long as necessary. So the UK has come online with what looks like the EU sanctions package there, and that's what's needed. Now, we're going to end on a positive. So a British fighter, Dubois, has been listed on the Ukrainian kind of general staff infographic, or the Air Force infographic, where we normally see drones getting taken out. We now have a Boxer taken out. Why? Because Dubois was beaten in Wembley by Usyk. Now, Usyk, the Ukrainian Boxer, is he's made history again. He's united the 3 belts. I don't really understand boxing, but something like uniting those 3 belts for the second time, which not even Muhammad Ali did. So he then said this. Let's listen to him. He said, I want to thank all the guys who are, he's saying this in Ukrainian, currently defending our country. I receive many messages yesterday and today from the various units that defend my country on the front lines. Guys, glory to Ukraine. You are incredible. You allow me to be here now. And I think he took up arms at the beginning of the war, didn't he? To defend Ukraine. So anyway, that is fantastic news. And he reveals what was the decisive blow, his Ivan.
It's a punch name Ivan. Yeah, left.
You know already.
Left hook is like this hook, and back Ivan. Yeah. It's Ukrainian name.
Right.
Yeah, Ivan is like a big guy who living in a village and work in farm. He was a big guy, like a Cossack. What is your name? My name is Ivan. Yeah, it's a hard punch. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Brilliant. So success for him. That was excellent, I believe. I wasn't with it particularly. Was it 5th round or something? Knocked Dubois down, and really good success there for the Ukrainians. So happy days there. Anyway, that's enough from me, guys. Take care of yourselves. I don't think that. Let's just give a last minute check. I mean, some pretty striking imagery coming up from last night. Typically so. Just seeing if there are footage shows the assembly of Garand drones in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan. The site was targeted by a Ukrainian drone strike about a month ago. It's been targeted a number of times, but look at these. They might not all have warheads in them, but look at the production of this. Is like, that's why you're getting 300 to 600 drones many nights in a row. This is a huge undertaking. That is a place that needs to have been destroyed. It really does. And that it hasn't already been destroyed means that it's very difficult to do so, evidently. Otherwise, the Ukrainians 100% would have done so. It's a long way away, and there's probably quite a lot of air defense around it. So, yeah. Just seeing if there's anything else to note. Just talk about arbitration or against Gasprom. So I guess we'll leave it here. Ukraine has secured $6.9 billion in international arbitration wins against Russia and Gasprom. Clear proof of accountability and the power of international law. We're now preparing concrete steps to recover those funds, with diplomats to receive new directives tomorrow. That's from Zelensky himself. So that'd be great if they can get money from Gazprom and Russia. So yeah, Russia's revealed the scale of its Shahed production. I mean, that is just insane. What else do we have? Possible drone strike hit the premises of Angstrom JSC in Zelenograd. So that could be last night. We mentioned Zelenograd. Russia's defense sector. The company is linked to Russia's defense sector as one of the country's most advanced semiconductor production facilities. But who knows the level of the damage. And in Nizhny Novgorod, a train carrying hazardous chemicals exploded near the city of Dzержinsk, just 40 kilometers from a major urban center of 1.2 million people. Firefighters arrived in hazmat suits, yet so there's been no official word from local media. I think that's an illustrative photograph. So that might be something to watch out for. now they're asking me to pay an extra $980 for each ticket. What's going on? There should be at least some basic respect. Chaos at Moscow's airports again. Mass flight cancellations and delays have started due to the threat of drone attacks. Video shows the situation outside the airports, people sleeping in flower beds and all sorts. So it is pretty chaotic there. But yeah, and lots of videos of people asleep at the airports, not able to fly due to the Ukrainian attacks by drones. So even if the drones aren't necessarily like super successful in striking their targets, and that's yet to be seen, they are at least affecting Russia's aviation, and that will negatively affect the economy and cause people to get annoyed at the war. Whether they'll take that out on Ukrainians or Russians is another question. Okay, that's enough for me. Take care. That's one of my long goodbyes. Speak soon.